Hello everybody and welcome to our second Exceptional Parents meeting for this year. We're so excited to see everybody here. We have a very exciting new type of panel that we're doing tonight, so we look forward to your feedback on what you think about it. We have thank you to all the parents who have donated $20 towards our parent fund this year. And if you haven't donated, please see Nancy in the corner. See Nancy? Notice that's Nancy. Over on the table, we have a couple of different, people have asked about getting involved, joining committees here. We have a couple of different committees, a hospitality committee, a welcome committee, and a
cleanup committee.
And a cleanup committee? Yes. And that other committee, called the cleanup committee. So if you are interested in getting involved in any way or in other ways that we haven't thought of yet, please talk to me or talk to Lupe or talk to Yudi. We've also printed out some information about self-determination, which is a conference many of us have recently attended, which will probably at some point affect most or all of us and our children. The 2:30 to 3:30 time, we had many people here. This was our first time people had asked for more time to meet and greet, get to know each other, network. So thank you for coming, 2 to 3. And if you weren't here from 2 to 3, we're going to try it again next time. And let's see, next time, February 8th is our next meeting, and we have Dr. Ricky Robinson speaking about such an important topic to us, moving from it's all about me to it's all about us, developing relationships in adolescents and young adults with autism spectrum disorders. So we're talking about puberty and beyond.
How to marry off your kid.
Exactly. How to find that right special someone for your child.
And now I would like to introduce Lupe. Woo!
For those of you who may not know me, I'm the new development director for this wonderful organization. I am honored and thrilled to be part of it. And I wanted to give you all, I'm sure by now have received this packet, which has been for the first time that we actually did an event that was not really an event. But it's been 60% participation from all the parents. I wanted to say thank you for those of you who have committed to supporting us. And today we have these packages ready to go. And what we're asking is that you please consider taking 2 of them with a note and send them to somebody who might be mindful of giving us a donation. And that means $10, that could mean $5. But as we all know, grassroots fundraising is what got our current president his seat. So anything that you can do to support us, thank you. And thank you for those of you who already sent in your contribution. It's wonderful. And as you know, part of the tuition, it has to be, we can't, continue our work without really fundraising the Let's Rest on these tuitions. So those of you who have contributed, thank you so much. With that said, please see me. If there's committees that we're trying to form, we're looking at perhaps doing an event this year for the first time, so we're hoping to get that off the ground. And I think that's about it.
The only thing I'm going to add is the parent participation this year is already double what it was last year, so we are definitely moving in the right direction. Really rock, we're starting to get donations in, and yeah, I'll just emphasize what Lupe says, which is please, pass it along. If you want the email version, you can send that out. In fact, we probably will be sending it out again this week. Just forward it if there are other relatives, grandparents, friends that might be interested in donating. It is, of course, the end of the year and they get a tax deduction. Okay, thank you. You want to introduce the speakers? Sure.
This is our panel on housing, and we actually are going to let each of our speakers introduce themselves. The format that we have kind of loosely organized, again, it doesn't exist yet, so we're in an organic process. We're going to let each of the speakers speak, the speakers are going to speak for 20 to 30 minutes as long as they feel is necessary. And we'll kind of go down a row, ask questions, and kind of open it up to a group discussion. So we'll be interested to see after our process what you guys think.
So, welcome everybody.
morning. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I have a little PowerPoint coming up. So I am a psychologist by training. I worked at the Help Group for 8 years. I did my postdoc training as a school-based therapist at Village Glen in Bridgeport, and I moved up and ended up becoming their director of the residential program called Project 6. I was the director for about 5 years. I left the Help Group and I went into private practice as a consultant, basically. And what I do now is I work with families and I help them locate appropriate programs and housing for their older adolescents and young adults. I've worked with several of you here, and it's been a pleasure. I said to Judy, half the battle is finding an appropriate program, and so here we are. I have a lot of clients that are members of the Exceptional Minds family, and they're doing phenomenal. So that's really what I do. I guess today what I want to talk about is my process working with families, and hopefully answer some of your questions. I will not be speaking for 30 minutes. Part of what I do is the post-secondary considerations. So we really look at your young adult, your adolescent, and we talk about what are their needs, what is the long-term planning and the care for your child. And really, we talk about every child deserves a great future, as I hope to. And that's what I do, is I look at the young adult, I meet with the young adult, I meet with the family, and I say to you, what are your goals? What is it, it's not just right now, what is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and what is it that's gonna make you feel whole and fulfilled? Because all of these young adults, no matter what their needs are, deserve to have that. And so we talk about what is your level of functioning, what are your independent living skills, your social skills, do you have psychiatric needs, clinical needs, also in terms of your executive functioning, what are those needs? And so we look at all of those different aspects when we talk about housing, when we talk about programs. And we want to make sure that we're really covering all of those basics. So that's what we talk about what are the current levels of independence. So when we're looking at programs, and I'm looking at Exceptional Minds, and obviously, what are their interests? Are they interested in technology, in editing, in working with all the different Adobe suite? I don't think that's what a lot of our kids are interested in. Also, we talked about vocational supports, level of social skill development, mental health services. I think a lot of the challenges that I find with my young adults are, trying to identify what their interests are, and luckily Exceptional Minds is here to tap into a lot of our kids' interests, but there are a lack of programs that their kids are interested in, and also funding. We take a look at, what are our funding resources, and we're going to talk about that next. In terms of post-secondary options, I won't gloss over that because we're obviously here, but some of the things we look at: vocational training, home-based programs. Depending on if your kid is regional center funded through the school district, or private pay, you've got independent living skills, supported living services, community-based programming. Also, different options. Marianne is going to talk about Fred and Golden Heart Ranch. Transitional independent living skills programs. Ranch is a ranch-style housing option, group home options, also apartment living. I heard someone here may be purchasing an apartment building, which is very exciting. So yes, you can go to the next. So when we talk about challenges, I know that was something that you had asked me to talk about. What are some of the challenges? And that's, the biggest hurdle that I have is the funding. Is really helping families, and Cindy, we were just chatting about this as well, where does the funding come from? And here we are, we're struggling, we've made it through the IEP process, many of us, and luckily we have a school district that might be funding a school placement. Some of us don't have IEP funding, and so you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that your kid is getting the right services, and now we're looking at long term. And many of our kids will need long-term support. So where do we find the funding? I work with a lot of families that have regional center, and it's a struggle because you have a regional center coordinator, and oftentimes the coordinator may not, be aware of different programs. Also, funding for out-of-state. I know Nella's going to talk a little bit about that. Regional center will not fund an out-of-state program because it's not licensed by the state of California. So then we get into some of those battles. So really, where do we find the funding? Unless you are able to private pay, that's a big challenge. And so what I do is I work a lot with advocates and attorneys and try to help the districts see the light and find programs that are appropriate and either get the districts to fund or, local programs are few and far between, so working with regional center to find that program, and if it happens to be maybe somewhat right but not perfect, we try to tailor it so that it is a little bit more appropriate. Department of Mental Health, that will help with some clinical services. Department of Rehabilitation, they've come through with some vocational supports, which has been really nice. And SSI, I know a lot of our young adults are receiving SSI, and so sometimes group homes, if you're not funded through regional center, will accept SSI payment as a portion of it, which is nice. So being able to negotiate that. In terms of supporting our young adults, again, going back and really understanding what are their needs and desires and wants, and what is going to present them with that positive future, and making sure that we have all of the scaffolding in place. So, if they're struggling with executive functioning, having that good, solid understanding that, my kid, he might be in a great housing opportunity, but the day program, he needs to get there on his own. Okay, so do we know, is he able to get there on his own? Do we know how to navigate public transportation? Do we know how to, read the clock and think, okay, I have to be there at 9, I really have to leave by 8:15 to get there by 9. So understanding the current level of functioning, I think, is really the most important step, because we can set up our kids, but unless we're there to support them and they fail, that's the worst thing that could happen. Locating the appropriate setting and teaching how to self-advocate, that's another thing that I really do. I work a lot with the young adults, is once we get them into the program, how do you self-advocate? Because you want to make sure, us as parents, we send our kids off, and we want to make sure that they're safe and that they're healthy and that they're getting their needs met. And we can't be there 24/7. Ideally, that's the goal, is to have them go. So making sure that they're able to say, listen, I have this need, will you help me fulfill this need? And that's where a lot of our young adults are challenged and struggling is, I'll find a young adult that's in a supported college situation and he hasn't left his dorm in, a week or 2 weeks because he's feeling so anxious and there's nobody there to check on him. And so we've set him up in this great situation, but we really need to make sure that we're following through with all of that. And that's some of the challenges, because I think a lot of the programs will say that they're doing that, but they're not necessarily doing it. So we really have to advocate for our kids and also teach them how to advocate for themselves. That's the other thing about the IEP process, is really, teaching our young adults, depending on their level of functioning, always to be involved and to understand what's going on in the IEP process, so that we start teaching them that early on. I think I jumped around a little bit. That was all in 5 minutes.
So I'm Marianne Kaler, and I'm really honored to be here. I have many friends in the room, and appreciate being included with the distinguished panel. Just in terms of credentializing why I'm here, first and foremost, I'm a parent. I have a son that's turning 19 this month, and Liam is diagnosis of autism with pretty severe anxiety, comorbid, in addition to the, sort of like the built-in anxiety that you get with autism. He's got a special dose on top of that. So he has some pretty significant challenges, and cognitively would be considered on the more challenged end of the spectrum, and as opposed to the higher functioning, although I hate those kinds of categorizations. It's hard to explain who your person is if you don't, you kind of weird language around that. So Liam's significantly more challenged cognitively. He would not be a diploma student. He's more of a life skills student. And when he was diagnosed, let's see, he'll be 19, so he was diagnosed 17 years ago. Actually, yeah, this week it'll be 17 years, like we never forget the date, right? Where you were, and it's like, where were you when Kennedy was shot? So 17 years ago, 17 years of experience, So that kind of credentializes me a bit like everyone else in the room. We all have our war stories and things that we've been through that makes us experts in our own child at the very least, right? Also professionally, 30-year career in finance and marketing and business consulting. So I have that as a professional career, but my avocation has really stemmed from working in the field of disability advocacy, as many of us do, because of the love of our children or other loved one, which brings us into the field. And so I've done a lot of work serving on nonprofit boards and doing other kinds of things to invest in organizations that I believe really support our loved ones. A number of years ago, by way of association, I'm on the advisory board for Golden Heart Ranch, which I'll talk a little bit about with you all. We launched the FRED conference, and I'm the director of the FRED conference, which is an event, but sort of a movement that started about 5 or so years ago. Initially, really just to bring a handful of people together to do exactly what we're doing right here, which is mostly parents and professionals coming together and saying, oh my gosh, we've got this tsunami of young adults who are, moving into adulthood with nowhere to live. What are we going to do? How do we sort of open the kimono and share ideas and make it as easy as possible for us to replicate best practices and try to get things started? So we thought it would be a group about this big, and then when we kind of checked it out, we realized that the need was so great nationally that our first event, we had over 300 people there in LA, and it's grown from there. And the intention of the FRED conference is to do what you see here, which is housing is an issue, but what we very quickly moved into was employment and really quality of life, because I have sort of a black humor, so if that comes out, I'm going to probably have to edit a bunch of stuff out of this because I'm completely, like frank and candid, which gets me into trouble a lot of times. But, I'd say if you want a place to live and 3 meals a day, go to prison. You know what I mean? It's like if you really want quality of life, it's a whole other thing. So we're really not talking about housing. Housing implies a roof, a bed, place to stay, And talking with one of the moms beforehand, it's like, there are places out there that have a bed and you can eat, but is it really the quality of life that you want for your loved ones? So those are the things that Jessica does, and those are the things that Ella's, going to talk about. It's how do we really make sure that we're maximizing our loved ones' potential based on where they're going to be in the future when we're not around. And also, dirty little secret, we get to have a life too. For those of us who have spent decades scaffolding and loving our kids, we like to, have, a little fun before, our days are done too. So we get to have a rich, full life as well. So we started the FRED conference, and as a result of that, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do is to really get a bit smarter about what's happening around the country, mostly around the world a little bit, but mostly around the country around housing. And we had the opportunity, we were kind of shocked because if you speak at FRED, you don't get paid, we don't pay for your hotel, we don't pay for your flight, so it's really like a crappy place to be a speaker. And we have never paid for anyone. We've had the top experts from around the world come to FRED and speak. So we've been really, really lucky for that. Some of the places that I get to visit are fantastic, some of them not so much. I saw a place recently that I won't name that is considered to be fabulous, and everyone's like, oh, this is like, and I went to visit and I was like expecting to, fall in love, and I was really like, ugh, and I thought, because this may sound like a small thing, but to me it's everything. The executive director took us on a tour and was talking about them. They like this, they do this, we do this because they like that. And I was so struck by the distinction of, and I kept thinking, who's they? Because in my world, I'd rather be around the people with the diagnosis than pretty much much anybody. So I think that's we, you know, like, but it sounds like a small thing, but it was this beautiful facility, it cost a fortune, that everybody's seeming, you know, I'm sure they have a waiting list, you know, forever. And I thought, that hits the nail on the head. I'd rather have my son be somewhere that's much less architecturally fabulous and maybe have more simple lifestyle and be with people who really consider him to be part of the fabric of everyone else on the planet. So I say that just because I think as we think about housing and we think about quality of life, there's so much that goes into it beyond a physical structure. Okay, so if you flip, Fred, you know, what is Fred? So it used to stand for something else before we got bigger and broader. So now it stands for Furthering Residences and Employment with Community. I just summed up why, I think. I'm going to make, before we go to the next slide, I'm going to make an announcement that is actually going to be announced this week. So I'm going to assume that this won't be posted before Tuesday when it hits the constant contact and social media frenzy. But we're actually not having a Fred 2015 this year. And I made the very difficult decision to do that because of a very good reason, which is we're in the process right now of finalizing acquisition of land for Golden Heart Ranch. And we just acquired between 20 and 30 acres to build a lifelong residence in Southern California that is an intentional community. And the same unpaid volunteers who run Fred are the same unpaid volunteers who are going to be at the ranch with shovels making that happen. And what with the decision, and I kind of shocked everyone because we were having a planning meeting and I said, I'm going to say something that's going to freak you out, but I think we need to postpone Fred this year because we've got a mission that is really critical. And so the next Fred will be March of 2016. I highly recommend everybody make sure they get there because we're going to be a heck of a lot smarter. One of the things that we've been developing that will be much further developed is something that we kind of talked about, which is a blueprint of the life cycle of how you get to developing a living community, regardless of what the model is. And it's been 5 years leading up to this point for Golden Heart Ranch, which is really like a standard timeline. Like from the time that, you know, a group of parents get together and say, let's buy this, you know, let's do this thing, to the time that you're actually where we are right now, it's roughly 5 years is about right.